Hi everybody, Chris here from Truly Holistic. Now in this video, I'm going to be referencing a lot of material from the Star Wars universe in regards to his terms as the Vergence, the Force, Midiclorians, and all these sorts of things that are terminology used in Star Wars, because when I look at anything to do with Star Wars, I look at consciousness, I look at spirituality, right? Light side, dark side, finding balance in the force, levity, gravity, the source of our consciousness sounds like force, right? So we're going to go into some of these terminologies that's been coming through recently, and I'm going to shape it into a way that associates with your own creative process, moment to moment, which is connected to the fabric of reality that you will forge, which directly is connected and relevant to the experience of your reality, including what you experience through the body, right? Whether that's wellness, vitality, or health problem. Okay, I'm going to break it down in a simple way that makes it all come together and for you to completely understand. I'm excited about it. I hope you are. Right? So, where we're going to start with is recently there's been a show called The Acolyte, right, on Disney Plus, which is a recent Star Wars show, right? And it talks about Vergence, right, which is a place, right, that enables life, the creation of life in a, I wouldn't say an unnatural way, but this connects into what I've been looking into recently about conception and the symbology, the geometry of conception being two circles that overlap each other, right? So two polarities, right, that make up a duality, but coming together, which then they overlap and create that Vesica Pisces geometry, which then presents as neutrality, which is another way of saying balance, which then becomes a space or state that allows a form of conception to occur. And we've connected that conception, that's geometry of Vesica Pisces, with the formation, right? The conception that makes a baby, right? But more specifically, the interface which we refer to as a body, okay? Because at that point, there's nothing driving that body, right? And what I mean by that, there's no soul at that point. But that same space holder, that Vesica Pisces, that neutrality, is the very same way that we come through to use that body, that interface for a lifetime, but us as the soul driving it, right? Using it as an interface to extend our will, to have an experience here. Because in the embryonic stage, when the heart is formed, that's when the soul comes through the heart, because the heart's a portal. And we know that the heart, as we go about an experience, is so important to keep it open and allow it to be a pivotal part of our life, right? That leads our life, because the heart's got this natural ability to shift anything into balance. Okay? So this aspect of vergence, so the word verge means to incline in a certain direction or towards a particular state. So, right, it's the definition. And or the process or state of converging, right? Now, this aspect about converging or convergence is bringing something together, right? Just like I said, right, those two circles, right, those two polarities, bringing them together, not keeping them apart, which is duality. And generally the arc or story of what the human is, guided and controlled by the mind, is to stay apart, jump from one polarity to the other, which is to play the game of duality. But the answers, the secrets, the greater insights, the greater purposes are found in that middle region, that balance, that neutrality, right? So that happens with the converging, right? Now, there's also another term, divergence, right? Diverge. And diverge, obviously die, two, right, is it goes the other way. So instead of coming in, it goes out, right? So we can go opposite directions to two opposing polarities, which is then duality. So what we see in relevance to conception is convergence, right? Which is the formation of life, right? The body, the interface, but also us as the soul getting access here to use that body as an interface for a lifetime. But what we're happening is that's convergence is happening to get here. But when the mind intervenes and we embody the identification as a human, part of a collective we call humanity, that gets broken apart and it diverges, and then we become a byproduct of the state of duality, which often people call as the matrix world, right? It locks us into this limitation, right? And what we do at Truly Holistic is about getting people back into their heart, getting their heart open, getting out of the mind, dropping out of the mind into the heart, which really is what meditation is a practice of, right? To drop us back into the heart, to get fully connected into what we authentically and infinitely are. And when we're in our heart, we're converging back. We're coming back. Instead of being out here, we're coming back in, right? That vesica Pisces, that overlapping space or state, which we call neutrality. Interesting, right? Now, let's go straight to this next bit, which is the Force, right? References, a Jedi is a Force user. The Sith, which is more of the dark side, also a Force user. And they talk about an individual that is sensitive to the Force usually has a high midichlorian count. We're going to get to midichlorians in a minute, because this is all ties and connects into our creative process. Now, the word force, right? We know things like gravity. Gravity's a force, right? Now, when we get into, and gravity and levity seem to be opposing forces, right? So gravity makes things fall to the ground. Levity makes things go the opposite way, right? Levitate, ascend up, right? So it's got a connection to ascension. Now, when we look at the Latin word of gravity and levity and what they mean, right, in ancient language, the Latin word for gravity means heaviness, right? And generally, and also the Latin word for levity means light. Now, generally, our experience of life is what is felt, right? What we feel. I was talking to someone today about this aspect that, if they were saying, hey, I went and saw a doctor, and then they did all these tests and diagnosis, and they said, this is possibly what I have, and so on. But I was like, hey, just wait a minute. What was the reason you went to them? And they'll go, well, something didn't feel right, right? So feel, right? That's the body's discernment. That's how it communicates us through feel. And feel is an extension of where we come from as the soul, the heart, right? While at the human, we're conditioned to use the discernment of thought, even though really that's not in alignment with how the body communicates. And hence, this is why we quite often misinterpret and misunderstand as the human, with the mind governing your discernment, what the body's actually trying to show you, right? And what it means, what that symptom, that form of expression it's providing to you, what it ultimately means, right? So when we look at gravity, right, heaviness, that's what's being felt, right? And when we look at heaviness, this is quite often when somebody feels overwhelmed and stressed, right? Which is a state that we don't like, that the body's crying out, telling you, this is not the state we want to be within. And, under being overwhelmed, stressed, feeling the weight of the world on our shoulders, pressure on our chest, our body, when we're unwell, when we have illness, we usually feel heavy in the body, which we call lethargy. Right, so this is the effect of heaviness, gravity. And we know that that's connected also when we are in the mind and we are using our creative process of our attention intention from the mind and its thoughts. Because what happens is our creative process, part of my four domino process, is that when the mind is guiding and controlling our creative process of our attention intention, it will result in our auric field collapsing in, right? Which is this pressure that's coming in. It's gravity, right? And then a big role of our body, right? As I mentioned, it's a form of expression through symptoms that communicates to you. And what it's communicating to you is the state of the field. So if that's collapsing in, you won't see that, but you'll feel it. That's what the body is telling you. So, like for example, a real sudden collapse in the field will result in somebody feeling anxious or a panic attack. Because if we could see that field, remember our observation is so limited, right? Less than 1%, the electromagnetic spectrum of light. It would look like four walls of the room coming and caving on you. No wonder we're going to feel anxious and panicky, right? Now the other one, levity, right? Latin word it references light, is we're going to feel lighter through the body. We're going to feel more buoyant, right? Quite often people say you need a bit more levity in life, right? Laugh, don't take things so seriously, because we feel lighter. When we feel amazing, feel great, we tend to feel lighter, don't we? Right? And that's when our field goes that way, right? When the heart, where we come from, our soul is guiding our creative process, our attention and intention, which means then the field doesn't collapse in, it expands out, because we're presenting more of our consciousness that becomes the makeup of the field, right? And then our body is that focal point of expressing the field, okay? Right, so this interesting thing, and obviously force sounds like source, right? Our origin of where our energy comes from, our consciousness, our unique energy signature. So some really interesting parallels, right? Now, I mentioned midichlorians, right? Let's go over that. Now, midichlorians, right, is really, our immune system, okay? And our immune system is our field, our auric field, right? Because quite often as the human, right, we tend to describe our immune system as the intelligence of the body, right? But we've already talked about, the aspect of two possible pathways that guide our creative process, which we could call a consciousness or an intelligence. That's either through the mind or through the heart, right? And as I mentioned, the conception of ourselves in getting here was through the heart. We don't use the pathway of the mind. The human gets conditioned to use it, but it's not supporting us. That's what I've come to find, right? So I was watching this aspect of, our immune system, right? Because as I said, if we're in here in the mind, and the mind's controlling our creative process, our field collapses in, and we become more vulnerable to outside sources, which means then we lose our immunity. Our immunity gets suppressed or gets manipulated with, right? Because that's what an autoimmune condition is, like rheumatoid arthritis. It's when our immune system gets manipulated to attack itself. Right? Not work for the body, but work against it in a conflicted state. Okay? So your auric field can be seen as your atmosphere as well. Your auric field. This is why aura sounds like aurora, right? Which is found in the atmosphere of the Earth. And the Earth's known as a planetary body. Plus, when we have an experience here, we have an experience on Earth, which, what is it? A planet. So this here is my planetary body, right? Interesting, right? Again, parallels. Now, so I was watching this aspect of Darth Plagueis, which is the master of Darth Sidious that becomes the Emperor, right, in the original Star Wars. And he was well known for seeking immortality, and he wanted to, and he saw that as being able to guide and, in his perspective, manipulate the midichlorians to follow his will. Okay? Now, as I mentioned, we've connected midichlorians, that what's referenced in Star Wars, as your immune system, and we know your immune system as the field, right? Which is, your field expands out when you bring more of you as the soul, and it collapses in when you bring through another intelligence that's not you, but through the mind. Okay? So he mentioned this, right? And this is quoted. He goes, my blood, right? Blood is really referenced as our life force. Why? Because it connects to the heart, right? The cardiovascular system. He goes, my blood, my essence. What he's referencing there is his consciousness, his soul, his unique energy signature. My blood, my essence, my midichlorians defy my will, right? What he wants them to do, they are not following that command, right? So as I mentioned before, right, an autoimmune conditional problem is when your immune system, your intelligence, or what you believe is your intelligence, is working against your will, because your heart's desires is not for the body to attack itself, right? So the only option you got there is something is directing those physiological processes against your will. Okay? So it's not, that command's not coming from where you come from, which is through a heart, through, be it the soul. It's an intelligence that's coming through the mind, because the mind's not you. Okay? Interesting, right? So in this Darth Plagueis, he was all about, manipulating or implying his will on the midichlorians that create life. Again, that aspect of conception we were talking about before. Right? Why the midichlorians weren't defying his will? Because he was not providing that neutrality space. Right? Neutrality. What aspect of neutrality comes from us? Heart, which would allow your will, your heart's desires, to extend on the very field, your own creative process that forges your fabric of reality. Right? Isn't that interesting? Right? Then you can apply your will. Right? So your reality reflects your heart's desires. It's the same thing when people come for a session, right? They're wanting change. They're wanting to get rid of something that is unwanted, something that is not in alignment with their heart's desires, right? So it's defying their will or going against their will. And most of the time it's because they are allowing an intelligence that they believe is themselves, but it's not, to imply its will, not yours. Okay? Interesting. Now, another thing he mentioned was this aspect that an individual's midichlorians, right, its own unique energy signature, seems to be aware of who and where they came from, where they belong. Right? Meaning it's a unique energy signature. It's not just energy that can be thrown from one individual to the other. And what we find here at Truly Holistic is when you feel you need more energy, that's not the full picture. You need your own unique energy signature. Because we do a clearing here at Truly Holistic where in your field, to get your field expanded again, we need to get rid of the energy that didn't originate from you, originated from outside sources that have become part of your field and have been embodied, part of your physiology that is not in alignment with you, and hence there's a conflict, causes these problems. We call that duality energy, discordant energy, right? So he found that the midichlorians serve that individual and that individual alone. It's the same with us, right? We want to connect people into your energy signature. It's what makes you unique, Okay? Interesting stuff. So when people are harking on about this aspect, this collective, which is a hive mind aspect, when we connect into that hive mind, we facilitate an avenue where we absorb energy, other people's energy signatures into our own field. And we see that truly holistic as a core aspect of what causes problems. Okay, because we're not mind, we are heart, we are the soul. Okay, and the soul is your unique energy signature. A bit like as the human, we have a unique fingerprint, right? And isn't it interesting? A print, because we are here as the soul to have an experience to imprint our heart's will or desire on reality. Like we are the person with a paintbrush, got an empty canvas, and we are here to imprint our will on reality, not the other way around, the way the mind will tell you that you then, from the mind, you allow everything out here to run over you like a tsunami, which has detrimental effects, especially to the heart. This is why cardiovascular disease is the number one killer of humans, right? We'll just see if we've got anything else here. So I mentioned earlier, right, that it's known in Star Wars that generally an individual that has a higher midichlorian count is more force sensitive. Now, this is interesting because when I'm working on clients that, especially clients that are heavily mind oriented, right, and we've got to get them out of there and get them back in their heart, quite often they'll be the individual that won't feel the energies that are going on, right, the shifts that we're trying to work on. Because the mind is very abrasive, while the heart and your consciousness, your soul, is very subtle. Okay, sensitive, right? Because it's feel. Mind's thought. Thought's very abrasive, and generally we've been conditioned, right, to the nth degree to be up here in the mind and use observation, which is limited, greatly limited, right? And a thought process to then try and understand what we see and what we perceive is very limiting, right? And it's very abrasive because it's noise that kind of, it clouds your instinctual tendencies that are coming through the heart, right? So if we connect midichlorians, right, to this field, right, to more of your intelligence, your consciousness, the more open our heart becomes, hence more our auric field expands out, that individual will gain a sensitivity to your energy, which is to become force sensitive, right? Which is pretty cool because the thing about the body, right? The body is needed, right? The body's never letting you down. Doesn't matter at what state you are in regards to an illness or wellness, vitality, across the board. Your body has been your greatest ally, always has been. It's whether you've interpreted or understood it or not. And generally, the way we are conditioned as the human, right, to use the discernment of the mind's thoughts, which are not us, not there to serve us, right? It's misinterpreting and misunderstanding how the body's communicating to you, because the body doesn't use thought, it uses feel. And as I say, the mind and the heart aren't working for the same team. You come through the heart. You use this body as an interface to have an experience for a lifetime. The mind is something else that's coming in that also wants to use this interface. But it's it's conflicting your process because it's not you. And this is very important to understand, right? So, and generally as the human, we follow our limitations, what we see in this thought process, and that we're not even aware of a field, of our auric field, of how we got here and where we come from. Okay. Now, the body's so important because for most of us, our auric field, we can't see it, but we can feel it. And how we feel it is through the body. Okay, so there is a purpose to the symptoms the body presents. It's our job to interpret and understand what it means. And we cannot do that when we're up here. When we're in here, which is connected to feel, which the body communicates through feel, we can interpret it. It's like two different languages. If we're up here, body communicating through feel, we're trying to interpret it out of thought. And how modern medicine does it, right? Blood tests, numbers. That's analytical, that's cerebral, that's compartmentalized, that's all mind, that's thought. You're trying to decipher what's going on in the body, which is all based on feel. no wonder it doesn't work, right? So I hope you really enjoyed this video. You can tell I've enjoyed it, bringing the relevance of something like esteemed science, esteemed fiction, right? Which is Star Wars. But Star Wars is so connected into what we are, more than you could ever think. Okay, and I hope we've bridged a lot of what happens in Star Wars, the terminology, and how it immediately and directly connects to your own creative process. And I tell you, your creative process, based on this new approach we're using with a 4-domino effect, is that it shows and represents your creative process, step by step, domino by domino, and how it connects to your ability in forging and creating the fabric of reality itself, and how it ties and connects into how our body expresses itself, whether it's in a well and vital state or in a dis-ease or illness state. It's the way forward. Truly Holistic is on the cutting edge of this. It really is. So make sure to come and book a session with me at trulyholistic.net/appointments/ Make sure to like this video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, push the notification bell so you get to know when there's a new video being released. Until next time, catch you later.